Want to know the best way to gain the most RP possible? Well, I gotcha. Howdy legends, my name is Zephyr, and after watching this video, you'll know exactly how a predator juices his gains. But before we hop into the action, our question of the day. What's your favorite loadout this patch, and why? Let me know in the comment section below. Let's start with tip number 1. When it comes to maximizing gains, hot dropping surely can't be your go-to play. Rather, look to land safely, loot up, and play for mid-game fights to transition into the late game, or attempt to play for third partying. For this, you have to have a thorough understanding of the most contested points of interest and what areas provide enough loot to get you up to speed when it comes to combat power, and obviously how to spot a good moment to get things rolling. Don't forget that other teams are also very likely to abuse this tip, as third partying is just the easiest way to get points. However, it will always and forever remain a double-edged sword. Another thing before we move over to the next tip, for the absolutely safest approach without any third party involved, you can simply pick a POI with a crafter and take it slow. Tip number 2 is about how to execute a third party. Whenever you try to third party outside of the very early game, there's something you do in order to make it safer. Try to look for fights close to the edge of the map or zone, because then it's significantly less likely to encounter other squads that are ready to third party you after you just finished up. For tip number 3, I want to put an emphasis on an all-time classic: finish fast or dip. Whenever you extend any type of skirmish, the chances of turning into the center of attention skyrocket, and therefore third partying becomes far more likely. Don't get baited into the sunk cost time fallacy. If a fight looks really grim and you've already invested a lot of resources, just cut your losses. The chances of you magically accelerating the fight are close to nil, so why should you even try it? Worst case, you feel inclined to make a bad play to finish the fight and then end up being gunned down. Forcing every single fight is not something you need and want. The best Apex players pick their fights, so join them, as they're going to teach you anything you need within a lesson over at ProGuides.com. Tip number 4 is about target selection. You've heard it plenty of times already. This guy is cracked, he's flesh, and all the other things you can possibly imagine. But how about taking the lead and making active callouts on who to shoot? Let me paint a picture for you about this. If you have the option to sneak up on a team or any type of third party or gunfight, make sure to call out one target. Just blasting multiple enemies from a range will only inflate your damage dealt, but it won't really have a positive outcome for you personally and squad-wise. Worst case, you'll invite others to third-party you, as you're turning yourself into the potential center of attention for no real benefit at all. Therefore, make sure to conduct your teammates accordingly. Give them the option to take proper angles and count down. Once someone is down, you can start rushing them and clean up the fight within an instant. Next up comes tip number 5. For this, you have to take a good look at your comp and think about your possibilities. Does your squad have the ability to bunker down and fortify a specific location that can be used as an asset? If you can, then make sure you find a suitable place to sit in and wait. However, not all of us have access to such a luxury, especially when it comes to solo queue. Don't worry though, we've got an easy fix for that. Yet again, it sounds very obvious, but you'd be surprised how many times people just disregard the basics of the game due to them being less fun. And well, in the end, it's about maxing out RP gains and not about having the most fun. So, hug the zone as long as you can. That way, you'll be less likely pushed from behind and you'll have a decent spot to play from. If you think that you struggle with those kinds of things, I can only recommend you check out ProGuides.com for additional tips, tricks, and private coaching. Compared to the more zone-centric approach, you also have an easier time rotating to potential third parties, as you're not in the middle of the damn zone. Trying to apply the finish fast or dip trick will become substantially harder once you're in the middle of zone or in a fortified location. Once you leave, you'll be blasted from all directions and are going to have a hard time making it out alive. With tip number 6, we need to talk about gatekeeping. Whenever you see a squad outside the ring that's headed towards the ring, you should hide and wait for them to expose themselves in the open field and then gun them down. Here, it's about the element of surprise and sneaky tactics. It's not about a fair game or anything along those lines. You want RP, and they're delivering those right into your hands. And all you have to do is rob them of their lives. Any way you can achieve this will suffice, so be creative. Another thing about gatekeeping is the timing of it. Obviously, early game gatekeeping is less useful than late game gatekeeping, and here's why. If it's the third or later ring, you can actively block squads from entering the zone. Most of the time, they won't have enough time to rotate around, and they're forced to expend heavy cooldowns or will deplete the most of their medical supplies, which then turns them into prey. As they're running away, you ought to be very aware as they might get shot from another squad. Keeping that in mind will not only tell you about the others' locations, but also provide you with the opportunity to maybe ambush other gatekeepers. Tip number 7 will hit hard, but it's simply the truth. As you climb, you'll find out that most of the time in the higher elo, you won't really play too much if you want to gain RP. You'll slowly learn to adapt to the following concept: min-maxing. It's not about you and your ability to aim, outplay, or anything like that. It's more about your ability to calculate profits and losses of potential plays and playing towards those goals. I've told you before, it's not about the fun when it comes to getting the most RP. Implementing a certain rule set that is both flexible and consistent will make up for the best foundation you can possibly ask for. Playing for content, on the other hand, will provide you with a lot of fun and maybe some occasional RP gains, but also massive inconsistencies. What is your playstyle? Do you think you can be methodical enough to make the most out of your games? Next on the list is tip number 8 for solo queue chads. You need to take the game into your own hands at all times. Leaving things in the hands of people you've never played with before and hoping that they'll perform towards your expectations will only lead towards grief and frustration. Rather than going down that road, tell them specifically what you want them to do for you. Similar to the target callouts, it's about micromanaging your squad as well as you can. Distribute loot, attachments, meds, and tell them where to go. Ask them to use their tactical if you think it's a good time to do so. Do everything in your control to maximize your personal impact on the game, even if it ends up not working out. Fact is that you've tried, and if it happens to work out, it's due to your choices and actions. Incorporate that into your gameplay, and you'll spot the difference very soon. Last but not least comes tip number 9. This one is about your mentality. Differentiating the mode of playing to improve versus the idea of playing for RP is a very important task. If you want to strictly improve at the game, you should never care about your gains. Your only goal is to become better, and once you've achieved the improvement you are looking for, the RP gains will flow in naturally. Within this mode, there is no room for frustration about losing a game, as every single one should be seen as a lesson. Projecting this idea onto the strict RP-focused approach, you might already start noticing a big issue. You're actively paying attention to your gains, and the uneasiness and unhappiness will follow soon after when you fail to gain RP. Once that frustration sets in, it will affect your performance in a negative way, so it's up to you to either avoid that or fix it. To do so, I recommend putting yourself into the mood of actually grinding games. The isolated game itself won't count nearly as much as the entire session. And if we're honest here, when you believe in your own ability and know for a fact that you are good enough to climb, there is no way that you will not climb. Regardless of that, it's most definitely not a sprint, but a marathon. You have to learn that one by heart. Well, I've been Zephyr. I want to thank you all for watching. If you like the content, make sure to leave a sub, click the bell, and enjoy everything Apex in the future.